Now, foreign correspondents have faced dangerous and exhausting work this year, covering world-changing events from the Arab Spring to the nuclear crisis in Japan. Kate Adie is a former chief news correspondent with the BBC, and she's covered many of the defining moments of the past 30 years. She's in Australia at the moment to discuss her career as a foreign correspondent, and she joins us now from Sydney. Kate Adie, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, firstly, if we start with our top story of the day, Libya. You, of course, have covered Libya many times over the years. You've been to places like Sirte. How long do you expect the pro-Gaddafi forces to be trying to battle on to fight what seems as though the inevitable takeover by the rebels?
It's hard to tell. It is rather surprising to a number of us who know the country well that there have been people prepared to stand by the idea of fighting for Gaddafi, because when you talk to people over the years, they, behind their hands, very quietly, secretly, always said, and in fear, you know, when are we going to get rid of him? But there have been people prepared to fight. It's a very difficult story to cover for a lot of European correspondents who don't speak Arabic and who find themselves in very complex situations. It's not just a simple matter right through Yemen, Syria, Egypt, Tunisia and also Libya. What is happening? There are different forces going everywhere. And now, of course, we have 24 hours continuous coverage on a lot of channels. It's a huge challenge for correspondents.
You have had, like many journalists, a couple of bizarre dealings with Colonel Gaddafi over the years. I think he tried to run you over at one stage.
He's just a bad driver.
Yes, so he could be a very bad driver, and his aim was off that day. But do you expect him to go down fighting or to pop up in a third country?
I don't think he'd go to another country. He sees himself as embodying Libya, and that's probably it. And it's probably going to be impossible for him to go elsewhere, I suspect. One speculates about this, but the really interesting thing about Libya is that it does have great potential. It has always been a country that looks across north the Mediterranean, not really to the rest of the Middle East. And it has oil. So it does genuinely have quite a very good potential future.
Kate Adie, with all that's gone on over the past 12 to 18 months in terms of huge foreign stories, have you found yourself getting a case of the itchy feet?
No. Nowadays, as I said, there's a 24-hour news service, which really is a kind of live commentary most of the time, and you can't do that standing on a battlefield. You get shot. You don't stand up when bullets are flying around. You don't drag a live load of equipment and a satellite dish into a riot or a really violent demonstration. I used to do, along with my colleagues, a kind of eyewitness reporting where we went into where it was happening and brought out the footage and edited it somewhere else. I don't regret the passing of that. Television evolves. But certainly I wouldn't want to be just standing some distance from it, talking endlessly, I'm afraid, with all due respect to newsreaders.
Yes, with all due respect indeed. And do you see this as an inexorable change? Is there any going back to the time when foreign correspondents had more time to get into the field to provide further context, in-depth reporting and the like?
If you knew and I knew where it was all going, we'd all make a lot of money. I don't think anybody in the media business worldwide has a clue the developments which are coming down the road. The internet, improved technology, changes in what audiences are sitting and watching, particularly in large numbers. All of these things are a huge, great mixture in front of those who are trying to see their way through to the future in television. I would be foolish if I guessed. And where news is going, when you have Twitter, when you have people with mobile phones taking their own footage, we don't know. But we do have to be alert to it, and we do have to be concerned as an audience, not just us, the reporters. I think everybody needs to know where their news is coming from and what shape it's going to be in the future. And people really ought to sort of have a heads up about it, that it's up to audiences to make their voice heard as well.
You were in the field, of course, for decades in the days before this the advent of the 24-hour news services. And often on this program, we run reports from the likes of the BBC's Orla Guerin, jumping literally from one hellhole to another, something you did in your time. And it got us to wondering, how did you decompress? How did you come from reporting on, say, a flood or a civil insurrection involving lots of deaths, getting home to London or to base, how did you deal with the undoubted horrors that you saw on assignment?
You don't wait until you get back to London or to home base. You deal with things on the spot. One of the things about being a reporter is asking yourself, if you're a decent reporter, why are you there? And if the answer for me, which for me was, I go to tell other people. I get the opportunity, the privilege of showing the world to people, of saying, look at this. It's significant. We think it's interesting. Here it is. If you actually achieve, as it were, that spreading of information, even though it can be grim, it can be grief-stricken, it can be terrible things, at least you feel you're doing some kind of service, or at least I like to think that and feel it justified what we did. And therefore, at the end of the day, you feel I did a job. The fact that it does involve grim things, well, you know, that can happen if you're working in an emergency department of a hospital. That too is grim. But if you can do a job, feel you're somehow helping people to understand, maybe do something about it, well, that should dispel any nightmares. I've never had the nightmares. I did feel that even though things were tough, we had a job to do, and there's a certain sort of sense of, well, if you can do it to the best of your ability and people say, I saw that, you've at least done something in your day's work.
In these days of multi-platform news and of diminished budgets for foreign coverage, what advice would you have, Kate Adie, for a young up-and-coming journalist watching you at the moment, wanting to become a foreign correspondent? What's the best way of going about it?
Well, I listen to a lot of young would-be journalists coming out of college, and when you ask them, rather depressingly, what they want to be, they say rich and famous, covered with the celebrity culture, as it were. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about taking on a job which is a privilege. You've got to actually work very hard. You've got to be prepared to sleep in some pretty awful places, get absolutely appalling diseases, not be very clean, eat terrible things, and yet still sort of, you know, remain as much as you can, lively and perky, and want to get on with it. So you need a certain sense of determination, you need curiosity. And yes, there is a future in being a correspondent. I very much think so. We're just not quite sure what shape it will take.
Kate Adie, still very much lively and perky. It's been a great pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.